Today's SRB2 vanilla character is Fang the Sniper, or Knack the Weasel if you're so inclined. Knack the Jerboa, according to Sonic News Network, though I swear he used to be a Jerboa wolf. Wait, actually the page says he's now Fang the Hunter and not Sniper. Huh. Regardless of which of the many combinations of his name you use, Fang the Sniper being the one SRB2 uses and therefore the one I shall use in this video, this bounty hunter is your first villainous playable character. But how does he hold up against his more heroic enemies? Let's find out. So far, every character we've covered has fitted into some form of class. Sonic and Amy Rose were speedsters, for example, while Tails and Knuckles were both explorers. The prior two were focused on getting through a level quickly, but suffered from an inability to really explore the level, as they lacked many traversal abilities. The latter two were much slower, but had a lot of tools that really opened up levels for them. Fang doesn't nearly fit into either of these, but instead into a new category, the fighter. As I'll go into more detail about in a moment, Fang has some difficulty exploring despite his vertical traversal ability, and due to some of his quirks, he's not very fast at all. He's debilitatingly slow, in fact. Instead, he excels in the field almost everyone else can have some difficulty in, fighting bosses. This is due to his spin ability, the pop gun. At the cost of his removing his ability to spin, Fang makes sure he is strapped at all times, carrying around a pistol loaded with corks everywhere he goes. Pressing spin when standing still will cause him to fire at whatever nearby object he's locked in on, indicated by the small triangle, which will send out a projectile that destroys it without him ever needing to get in close. I don't think I need to explain why this is highly beneficial in boss fights. There's no ammo counter to be wary of like some mods with similar abilities, and you needn't aim either, as the game will automatically lock onto whatever is in front of you, oftentimes to a much greater range than I initially expected. This does have some drawbacks, namely that the game isn't always best at making sure you can actually, hit what you're aiming at, oftentimes firing corks at objects behind walls or trying to hit the exact centre of an object, which can lead to it missing when firing at targets at a different elevation to Fang. It also, as previously mentioned, can only be used when standing completely still on the ground, which limits your mobility quite significantly and effectively entirely stops you from being able to account for angles and such with jumping, and there is a slight delay between shots, meaning you can be overwhelmed if too close to a group of enemies. Also quite importantly, this is not a hit scan attack, as the cork needs to travel to the target in the physical game mode before it registers as a hit. Obviously, for monitors, most enemies and even some bosses, this is harmless and entirely ignorable, but it does mean that in some faster boss fights, Fang does need to put in a little tiny bit of effort into positioning so that he can hit the enemy. Fang's speciality traversal wise is verticality. He's the second character to have no access to a roll or spin dash, so he isn't particularly fast, but he does have a high jump and the tail bounce for his primary ability. Pressing jump in air will change his Fang's stance, effectively, meaning that when he lands, rather than run on the ground like normal, he'll instead bounce on his tail, acting as a much higher jump. This is a very unique ability, as no one else in the roster has anything like this, and it can help him reach higher areas. It is somewhat affected by things like drop distance and the angle of the floor you hit, so there are situations where you'll go forward faster or bounce higher, but it's generally a fairly stable up and down, where you can basically ignore everything on the ground. This is considered damaging, so jumping on most enemies will destroy them, though it can be difficult to land on such a precise point. You can break aiming floors with it, which is how you complete some levels that would otherwise require you to enter small gaps or spin machinery. More importantly, you are effectively immune to many floor hazards while in this state, such as spikes, lava and thorns. I don't know why. Fang's tail isn't some reinforced body part that can take significantly more damage, so I assume the justification was that if his body isn't being hit, then it probably wouldn't hurt that much. This does make him pretty good in a lot of areas, especially in Castle Eggman and Red Volcano, for obvious reasons. However, the tail bounce does have some drawbacks. It almost all comes down to a wider problem surrounding Fang's moveset though, namely that he is chronically slow and constantly stopping and starting. Both of his abilities have drawn out animations, long cooldowns, bizarre limitations, lack control, etc., all of which coalesce to make him a bizarrely handicapped character. I'm so sorry, Knuckles, for saying you were slow and unwieldy. I hadn't yet truly experienced the horrors of playing as Fang. There's so many of these that I'm just going to rattle through them, but it's safe to say that it really drags the character down, and the only reason I didn't notice it sooner was because I only ever used him in boss fights, where none of this really comes into play. Problem 1. You can only use your pop gun when standing still, on the ground. Why? What is the possible limitation that stops Fang from whipping it out in midair? If the computer needs to aim for me, and so often can't shoot what I'm aiming for correctly, why am I not allowed to correct it with a jump? Why, in such a momentum-focused game, does Fang's big, unique ability require me to stop dead in my tracks and then force me to wait for the computer to recognize what I'm looking at before I can shoot? For that matter, why is the animation for this so long? It makes being forced to sit there even more tedious, as you can't move your character for a split second before and after the animation plays, which is just really unnatural. Not asking for free aim, mind you, that would suck in third person, but I just want this ability to not be such a deliberate cliff for your flow to drop off of. Problem 2. Fang's bizarre momentum changes when using the tail bounce. Why? Who looked at this poor sucker and genuinely thought he's too strong, cut his momentum by half every time he enters and exits his bounce states? No! Don't do that, it's stupid! I can't count the number of jumps I missed because I was using my tail bounce, left it, and fell to the floor like a bag of bricks. And you might say, that's Aquaman, just get used to it. It happens every time you use the ability, it's not like it's sneaking up on you. No! It's so unnatural and he isn't particularly fast as is. You don't need to arbitrarily stick weights on him every time he stops bouncing in some spiteful attempt to get everyone playing him to smack face first into a wall, you bunch of weirdos. I don't need to be more hurtful with an insult there, just know it's stupid. Problem 3. Long animations. Fang just moving too naturally as is, seeing as we only force you to stop every time you use the pop gun and make you lose all your momentum every time you enter an X into your primary ability. Don't worry, we'll make sure he goes through a half-second animation every time he touches the floor when using it. Gotta brace properly to avoid injury. Thought Knuckles' brace animation after gliding was long and broke your flow state? Oh, you sweet summer child. Fang will make sure you fully appreciate the raw power he exerts every time he bounces, seeing as he goes oh so high, and the best way to do that is to make sure you sit there for an age while he readies for it. Why? Why is this so long? As you can see, clearly someone really hated Fang when developing his moveset, because he very clearly used to be much more powerful until someone came through and decided everything about him needed to be nerfed. He's had the moveset equivalent of getting your knees broken, and it makes him anemic to play. People were saying on the last video that Amy Rose is the worst character to play as an SRB2. Everyone who thinks that, I understand where you got that idea from. Clearly, like I once was, you have only played Fang to quickly dispatch bosses, an area he admittedly excels at, but I beg you, play as him for a little while in a standard level. He is, in my opinion, the worst character in the whole vanilla roster by a large margin, as while he's clearly had some decent ideas put through in the design process, his execution is miserable to play as. Just don't play him. After that segment of beating a man while he's down, I am happy to say that Fang's sprites are much better. They're absolutely carried by Fang having a really good design outside of the SPRITES' work, but they have done a good job into translating it into sprite form. He's probably the lankiest of the base roster, evident in his jump sprites, and he's a bit of an edgy tryhard, which has been carried over really well into his animations. He strikes a pose every time he shoots his precious little pop gun, and his idle animation where he tries to do one of those cowboy hides his face behind his hat looks is really good. But he's also a complete klutz, having to frantically grip his hat every time he begins to run so it doesn't fall off, and generally looking pretty scared the microsecond he's in a dangerous situation. Cool as a cucumber like Sonic? He absolutely is not. Like everyone, his upcoming sprite update looks great, giving him a more interesting pose when just standing around and improving his coloration to look more vibrant and saturated. Does it make up for an awful moveset? No, but the sprites are very good. should I just repeat what I said a moment ago? He is, in my opinion, the worst character in the whole vanilla roster by a large margin. As while he's clearly had some decent ideas put through in the design process, his execution is miserable to play as. Just don't play him. Is that perhaps a little hyperbole? Yeah, a little. But that's because he's carried by SRB2 being a fantastic game, and he is absolutely one of its worst points that tries to go against everything here and makes it so fun in the first place. He can certainly fight bosses. That's about all he can do though. He needs a major buff in the next major update to make him fun to play, or he's currently more a sack of disappointment dragging down an excellent set of sprites over an actual character. I'll give him a 3, plain bad. It would be a 2, aggressively bad, if not for a set of sprites. We have one more vanilla character to go, and then I don't really know what to do between now and Alan Wake 2 releasing. I guess I could get back to reviewing mods again, or maybe finish my Mania playthrough. Regardless of what I end up doing though, I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.